there we are, finally. Let's take a look at our schedule here, just to see what's coming up. So this week we're talking about chapter 2 of the textbook. Being accurate, relying on facts. So I'll give you a fact-checking exercise for extra credit today, due next class. So you'll see there's not a lot involved in it, but it could be fun, useful for you. So I'll give you that. And then otherwise, just a reminder that Monday's Labor Day, so if you have Monday classes, they're off.
Yay.
But we're a Tuesday class, so we're on.
Absolutely.
So, you turn stuff in through Canvas. Let me know if you're not familiar with that. But should be. Right, okay. This chapter, which I think is really well placed in the textbook, is about being accurate, which is nice because, well, here we are in a writing class, and we are going to be writing about real things, talking to people, gathering information from them. So we definitely don't want to make any of that up or mislead people just by errors of omission or anything else. So this is a good thing to start off with, I think, just to emphasize that sure, we're telling stories through media writing, but we're doing our best to make sure that they are accurately reported. So in this chapter, there's, hey Grace, there's a certain number of ideas about the importance of fact-checking. There's something that could be turned into a checklist of basic fact-checking items that you should do on anything that you're writing. And then there's, broader concerns about fact-checking in the media, which may go beyond anything that we would do in this class, but talking about, how media organizations depend on fact-checking and adequate information to do their job properly. So we could do worse than talking about something like that at the start of our class. Yeah. So let's see. Well, before we jump into PowerPoints, which tend to kill everybody, has anyone been the victim of an internet hoax recently or at any time? Or did you fall for some kind of bad information out there, Shannon?
I mean, like 3 or 4 years ago, I was super into all the like really intense internet articles that are not, you know what I mean? Like, I would say maybe 5 years ago, I got really into it, just like reposting without reading and all that
okay.
stuff. So yeah, definitely.
What platform were you doing that on?
On Facebook.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. And so you say without reading, I mean, you just like get a headline and said, wow, this looks important.
The article, oh my God. And then
then post it out. So you sound like you moved on from there. What do you think is different now?
I mean, after a while, you realize that you need like additional sources of information, and you start reading articles, and you're like, that doesn't quite seem accurate.
Okay,
So
cool.
It's just like growing up and getting facts,
Yeah. So more recognizing the importance of corroborating with another source, thinking critically about it, and maybe
reliable sources too. You
Yeah.
know, how reliable is your source, and like the motive of the sources that you're getting information from.
good point too. Okay, so take a look at where the information is coming from and ask what's their interest in sending this out, and then getting control over that impulse to circulate it before you know what you're circulating is true. That's excellent. You've come a long way in 5 years. Kyle, hoax?
I don't know if it was a hoax or if it was just poorly put out information. Because I don't really remember all the specifics of it, but I remember reading recently that the Great Barrier Reef had been declared dead, and turns out that's not true. It's in bad shape, but it has not been declared officially dead.
Someone could have said it was dead. Who would be your official source?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember, and I really don't remember much about it, but
Okay.
I have And again, maybe it is dead. I don't even know. Maybe the information I got where it isn't dead is.
I don't know. It doesn't qualify as a hoax if it can't be disproved, I guess. That's what I'd say. But if it can't be proved either, or if it simply depends on a semantic issue, like he says it's dead, she says it's not, it's almost, you know what I mean? That's useless, because then, okay, so maybe an expert, we could find out what they mean and just dig down deeper. Yeah, but so it doesn't quite qualify as a hoax, but I'm sure there's plenty of people hoaxing about that type of thing, but yeah. Nick, did you have one?
I don't know if it qualifies as a hoax, but just reading sports, wrestling rumors, and just some people saying, oh yeah, so-and-so from this website says so-and-so is going to return, or so this and such is going to happen, and it doesn't.
I see.
So, and then you end up believing it and you go with it, and it's like...
Did you check it out? Were you moved to check it out before you went with it? Yes, you did? Okay, that doesn't tell me. What's the answer, though? Did you check it out or not?
Yes.
You did. And did you find it was true or not?
It turned out to be false.
How did you establish that?
The website wasn't... I checked the website that they were citing, and it never really cited it. It was just...
Interesting, okay.
Fan theories.
Well, that's a good reflex to dig in there and check out and see if it was really there. That's cool. That's good. Kyle?
I haven't fallen for it, but I know there is a large movement of people who are starting to jump on the idea that Earth is flat. Yeah, you haven't heard about that one?
Oh, yeah.
The Flat Earth movement. There's like a legitimate group of people now who are online. I mean, there's a bunch of them. That's
You
like
say
one
that
of the
like
big
it's
ones,
not
though.
true.
And there's a lot of people who are legitimately like stating that science is wrong and that all
Well,
of these.
anybody could state anything,
A lot of
but is there anybody on
They
there?
even have like a diagram, because supposedly with the solar eclipse that was supposed to prove the flat earthers wrong, but they even had like a whole diagram of how to prove that no, that's part of the whole flat earth theory
Yeah, it's
of the
serious.
solar eclipse.
It is a hoax, like because there are people
Yeah.
out there that are starting to like believe that the Earth is flat and that they've been lied to their whole lives by flat Earth shills, and just like
What would
scientists lying
NASA have
you
to gain
and-
from lying theories?
Their funding.
Well, they already lost their funding, so.
It's like
So-
there's suddenly no outer space because the Earth is flat.
Right, okay. Let me see. I don't know about that. I guess if there's a debate and you know that you are reading one side of a debate and you know that another side exists, I guess I wouldn't call that a hoax, I suppose, because you have the ability to kind of choose, right? Like look for the other information and decide.
Well, isn't that? I mean, you can do the same thing with a hoax, can't you?
Well, this was the point of my question, was to try to see. I think a hoax, the type of thing that I was digging out was what sort of Shannon brought up, which was that if you don't dig at all, then you're going to be subject to getting bad information. If you're doing your best at digging, then you got a fighting chance against hoaxes. So that's it. I wasn't really trying to. I bet we could spend all day trying to find the juiciest internet hoaxes that are out there, but the idea was just to see how far we're willing to dig before we're satisfied that what we're reading is true, is real, or the facts that we think that we've got are accurate. That's basically it. Yeah.
That's
What?
such a tricky, like, even the way you word it, though, it's just like, that's the world we're in now, is when you think you know the facts you know. Like,
Yeah.
there's still more digging you could always do, and the internet has just like an infinite amount of information.
I know, I was waiting for that reflection, and the thing is, when you're writing for the media, you're only following one story, not an infinite amount of information, and it's on you to do your best to find out what's actually going on. And all we can ask is for anybody is to do their best, you know what I mean? But it's just the steps you got to take in order to do it. And people are wrong. Professional journalists are sometimes wrong, sometimes completely wrong. Part of what makes real journalism responsible and useful is that they try to correct themselves, versus I think there are a lot of people putting their opinion out, which may turn out to be completely based on fact, but are they willing to reevaluate, come out with a new story or whatever? I mean, I think that's a big difference between, a source of information which is one you can trust or not. Does it have a kind of an internal fact-checking accuracy thing built into it, or does it completely ignore it? And it goes right up to the presidency. So I mean, there's a lot of people who completely ignore contradictory facts. But we want to deal. I think we want to be professionals who are in pursuit of that as much as we can. Shannon?
I was gonna say, one thing that I find, like, I listen to a podcast called Hardcore History, where this guy just talks about in depth about things that have happened in history, but something that I find gives me more comfort about the way that he presents facts is he'll be like, okay, historians will say this, and on the other side of the board, historians will say that. At the end of the day, no one really knows, so like, there's all the information that's present.
Cool. So you appreciate someone who tries to lay out the different points of view if there is a kind of a discussion or controversy.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, especially with things that like aren't necessarily, you don't have first direct sources at the time, I think it's really important, or at least comforting when you're trying to assess, to have all the information put in front of you. If someone only presents one side, it kind of brings a little red flag, like, all right, well, I don't know. You're obviously not giving me all the information.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, another thing is that not every news story has to be about an issue which is of controversy or that there are several sides. Maybe you're just reporting about something that's happening.
Yeah, but people report things People report things differently just based on their ideals or how they feel. So.
Yes, but
things in history that aren't controversial, it's like certain details are more significant to other people than they are to. Certain details are more significant to some people than others, and so the way that they can present things will put emphasis on details that maybe spin things a certain way. So it's not necessarily intentional or trying to be biased or some kind of argument, but just in general, it could slight differences in opinion could really skew the way that something is perceived or told.
True, and I think if you're working on history, then there's history exists within narrative. But let's take another one. You're a television reporter, and the California State Analyst has just released a report about people at a college abusing travel funds or something like that. There's a story to report there. There are sources. There's the Cal State auditor, who's taken a look at the college. There's the college who's going to probably have a different point of view, or they're going to say, we got to see what they're going to say, right? And so it's not so much an issue of opinion, or there may not be a debate about it, rather than just you've got a story, something happens, and you need to accurately report what the auditor said and what the college said in response,
Right.
And then again, you can, if they don't match up, the reader can make that jump.
Exactly, but you want to know, oh, the auditor said that they're using X amount of money in funds. The college said they're using X amount of money in funds. Students themselves say they're using X amount of money in funds. So there's the information.
Right, and you get it out there. But there's really, whether it's opinion or not, your job is to accurately report what they say.
Yeah.
And then so that is an easier job than adjudicating between whether the Earth is round or flat. Basically, that's why I feel happy and lucky to be able to pick my battles and just want to do media write about what I want to write about. So let's get into it. So why does journalism care about getting it right? Okay, why should, in writing for this class, we should always try to be accurate about what we're writing? Okay, well, it's it's important that we get the facts out there so that people can make their own decisions and form their own opinions on what's going on. Again, everybody now can get access to a platform where they can, offer opinion and maybe information. But part of what we're learning about in the class is how to do a better job than just someone who's unschooled in this, right? So we're trying to raise the quality of our accuracy and of our reporting, basically. So that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? So let's keep our minds on that. Another thing is, in the media business, especially if your business is providing information, it all depends on your credibility and the trust that the public forms with you, in what you report. That's, I think, why the president is, making an all-out offensive trying to discredit a lot of professional media because he's trying to undermine the trust that the public has generally had. And we're talking in broad terms here. There's plenty of individuals who've never trusted the New York Times, but there is a consensus that, professional media outlets like the Times or CNN try to do better than, some other media outlets that the president may prefer. So the bond of trust is important. And again, if we're talking local news where it's not all about Donald Trump, a lot of it has to do with the trust and familiarity that any media outlet will develop with its audience. So like a television station, for instance. Lots of research done that, television anchors actually win the trust, like kind of, maybe it's a false sense, but of interpersonal trust with the hosts of television news shows. So they come to trust, an anchor. If that trust is undermined just by, the story being fudged too often, your reputation is blown, and then people will just stop watching. And then, that's costing you not just credibility, but money. So it's this bond of trust is really important. Anybody remember or have caught wind of the KTVU sort of scandal about JP? Do you remember any? I was just trying to look it up to find out the exact names of.
When the plane crashed?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So. Do they really have this up here?
Oh, holy fuck.
Nick, please.
No, I think that was the name.
Language.
I think you're taking advantage there. That's clever. You're fast on your feet, buddy. You're fast on your feet.
Coroner is still trying to determine the cause of death and whether she was already dead.
Oh, this is legitimate. I think they've taken them all down, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Something Wong,
Yeah.
okay. Fly too low, something like that. Oh, here's Frank apologizing. This is.
Has just learned the names of the 4 pilots who are on board the flight. They are Captain Sum Ting Wong, Wee Tu Lo, Ho Li Fook, and Bang Ding Ao. The NTSB has confirmed these are the names of the pilots on board Flight 214 when it crashed. We are working to determine exactly what roles each of them played during the landing on Saturday. Involved in the Asiana Airlines crash, these names were not accurate despite an NTSB official in Washington confirming them late this morning. We apologize for this error.
Tonight we want to take a moment and say that we are sorry Earlier today, during our noon newscast, we misidentified the pilots in the Asiana Airlines crash. We made several mistakes when we received this information. First of all, we never read the names out loud, phonetically sounding them out. Then, during our phone call to the NTSB, where the person confirmed the spellings of the names, we never asked that person to give us their position within the agency. We verified the information without questioning who they were, and then we rushed the names onto our noon newscast. Within the last few minutes, the NTSB issued this statement, quote, "The National Transportation Safety Board apologizes for inaccurate and offensive names that were mistakenly confirmed as those of the pilots. A summer intern acted outside the scope of his authority when he erroneously confirmed the names of the flight crew on the aircraft. We work hard to ensure that only appropriate factual information regarding an investigation is released, and we deeply regret today's incident. Appropriate actions will be taken to ensure that such a serious error is not repeated." Now, even with this statement from the NTSB, we want you to know here we accept full responsibility for this mistake. We issued an apology later in the noon newscast. We also apologized on our website and on our social media sites. The fact is, we have a lot of good people here at Channel 2. And on behalf of all of us, I want to tell you that we pride ourselves on getting it right and having the highest of standards and integrity. Clearly, today, that did not happen. We made a mistake. So again, from all of us here at KTVU, we can only offer our sincerest apology in this case.
All right, here we go. Cancel that. So it's possible to really mess up.
And he wasn't just cursing in class for no reason.
I'm just getting down here.
Thanks, Kyle.
Araceli, my apologies. If you have something to say today, I'll do my best to relay it to the classroom. I'm just, last class, once in a while I dip in to see what people are saying in chat, but you hear I get a little ding when people join, but I also, hopefully, what I'm trying to figure out how to do is to get chat comments to actually appear. If I can get a window that's shaped right, we'll be able to see it. Anyway, hopefully I'm not missing any current chat from our streamers, and my apologies, Araceli, I did see that I didn't get something interesting that you said last class, so we'll try to stay tuned to that this class.
Shannon said that there was 3 people were fired.
Yes, they were, yeah. Thank you. Maybe we could have a chat master here.
Yeah, the chat.
That's something we could talk about. Okay. Yes, three people were fired over that incident at KTVU. And we actually have these industry advisories, and the one person from KTVU who came in last time was just telling us, the question from the audience was like, what's the worst day you ever worked in your life? And he was someone involved on the technical end when that happened. It just said that was just like the worst possible thing. So you think about that one, that was obviously an intern who was fooling around and wasn't, that was purposefully done. People are cruel, says the textbook. People will mess with the truth for fun. I'm sure it was all in fun, but just, if A, it was offensive, B, it was completely inaccurate. It was like a huge mess. 3 people got fired because they didn't pick up on it. And whoa. So things can go really badly. I guess that's what we're
First mistake, we didn't
thinking
say
about.
the names out loud.
Yes, that's a good point. Even some of the basic fact-checking routines that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, if you just, for instance, read your copy out loud, which would be just something that you would do to make sure you haven't made any typos or left out a word or something. If you read it out loud and listen to it, you should have been able to pick up, something wrong.
Especially with names, aren't you supposed to be taught to learn to pronounce the names before you say it in broadcasting?
Yeah, that's more on the announcer. Yeah, the announcer, that's true too. I'm sure the announcer didn't lose their job, but that's a good point. The announcer must have said them out loud before going on air, because they do run over those. But I guess, this specific incident might, you know, we could, whatever. It's just an important cautionary tale, I guess. But had they read the names out loud, had they called to check the names and actually talked to someone who wasn't the same intern, I guess, who was fooling them to start with, then they would have, they probably would have known that this was fake, right? But
Even as you're doing it live, it feels like how you could get like maybe 2 into that before you're like, I'm just not going to read the last 2.
I have a feeling they must have had that sinking feeling or something, and then the phone probably started ringing like, what? Gosh, yeah. So they dropped the ball. I mean, the fact that there are professional standards means that that's why they got fired, you know. But so we should learn some of those and use them in what we're doing. Certainly can't hurt to be accurate, and hopefully no one will be trying to fool us like that. And we certainly don't have a platform where we'll embarrass ourselves in front of 1 million people. But it would be good, right? So you want to verify, there are different levels of verification, but some of the first things are, you know, just making sure about spelling mistakes and stuff like that. So we'll come up with a checklist in a little while. But first thing I think that Shannon was talking about was you know, getting access to primary sources. If the story is based on a document, to actually see the document is an important thing. If it's based on reporting what people have told you, you know, it's getting access to people who are reliable sources for news, and then, you know, creating a record of that so that it can be used by other people. If, for instance, if you're using reporters to gather information and you're going to use that information later on, and it's not just the reporter who's writing the story, you also want to make sure that, you know, those reporters' notes are actually available. And in fact, those are considered, you know, if you're sued for libel, if someone insists that you didn't say, that they didn't say what you said they said in an interview, those notes are important, kind of regarded as proof if there's no other record to what was in the conversation. So having access to source documents or primary notes is important to know that stuff. If you can't do that, or in addition to that, another reliable source, generally, stuff that's actually gone into print. I think the idea there is that it takes more people get their eyes on it. It takes more time to process the information to get it into print. And so in general, you know, if something's in print in a newspaper or in book form, it's not infallible, but at least you can source it to a publisher. There must have been some, you know, some editorial activity looking it over, and some company with enough means to actually print this book, versus, you know, having a blog for free under an assumed name and sending out, you know, information or whatever. Story?
I just said the Inquirer, but that's
the Inquirer. Yeah. Well, again, at least it's a joke because we all know it, and we all know it because there's a limited number of those dead tree publications, so it gives us a chance. You know what I mean? But when we come on a website with some odd name, we really may never have encountered that before. Jenny?
So, dead tree publication, I mean, I'm a little bit confused. Are we referencing essentially print?
Things that are printed on paper. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think so, yeah. And again, it's not implying, it says aren't always infallible, but at least you know the source.
And then, with regard to broadcast journalism, having visited a few studios myself, I do see a lot of the anchor and editorial team go into the newsroom and read the paper. And when they are broadcasting their news, anything that isn't, say, originally theirs, would it be standard to go ahead and cite these sources? Considering that you have to keep in mind that they're infallible, but if they're infallible and they're citing their source, to go ahead for the broadcast segment, does that relieve them of, say, the fallacy if it is.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, that's what we call attribution, which is citing the source of something, and that is, you know, I mean, I don't think anyone wants to put questionable information out, even if they do cite it. But you know, attribution typically it lets you off the hook. You're transferring responsibility for the information to the source. Now that doesn't mean that if you're consistently citing very weak sources that you shouldn't feel like you're not doing your job well. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so in a newsroom, like in a broadcast newsroom, you may be, you know, following all of the news media in the Bay Area, looking at their reporting, but you should be following up. You're responsible for following up on whatever you put on the air. So the fact that you won't see, for instance, KTVU consistently citing the Contra Costa Times or the Chronicle or whatever. If they have to, they will. But in general, they're going to do their own reporting on a story to verify facts and stuff like that, so that they don't have to constantly attribute, you know. But they're schooled in how to do that. It's just, you know, they're a news source in their own right, and they act like it. I mean, they have writers on staff who actually do that. Not the anchors, but they do that. Yeah. Okay. So another one you've probably heard from your reference librarian. I don't know. I used to take this class to the library, and we would do a little library research seminar over there. And they always said, don't take anything that's not from .gov or .edu sites. So again, you know.
Unfortunately, we can't rely on .gov right now.
Good point. Good point.
That's true.
They're removing everything they don't believe in. Yeah. Or it seems like it. That's an exaggeration. But there has been reporting that, like the EPA, for instance, when the administration changed, the EPA started taking down or making more difficult to access research that they used to have.
Yeah, and they took out anything talking about global warming. Like they took all the research out of the official .gov site.
Yeah, yeah. So I shouldn't exaggerate. That's something that I have seen reported. Yeah, thanks, Carmen. So EDU or GOV sites, you know, again, they trace back to actual institutions with a certain amount of authority and the information coming from there. Also, again, if you're doing a story even on, you know, I don't know, Kaiser, the health group or something like that, if you go to their official website, you can assume that you're getting Kaiser's actual position, right? Rather than relying on a third party who is, you know, interpreting what they've read on Kaiser's website. You should go there. So again, we're always going to be thinking about, is what we're reading, what's the motivation, what's their spin? Certainly, but at least we'll get their words by going to their official website. Yeah, and then as you develop expertise in a subject area because you report on it a lot, or if you follow up on one particular story, you wind up knowing a lot about it that you may have established from your own reporting. So your own work, your own previous work can also be a good, you know, source for you to work from. So there you go. Some more reliable places to look for. Making sure you are sure. Don't assume that something is true even if you believe it to be. So this is really where your dedication to getting it right would lead you even to just go beyond your, should we call it bias? Are we comfortable with that word? That you may have your way of seeing it, but you may also, you know, be dedicated to go beyond your way of seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you, if you know, it's agreed that media organizations fail all the time. I mean, that doesn't mean they don't do their best in order to get the story right. But if you look around the current information media, what do you see as the biggest, the most serious problem that you see there? Is it getting the details right, which is an issue? Is it, or do you think it's more important that they, for instance, have biases that they can't look beyond? Micah?
They report things as true because they want them to be true.
Okay, that's a pretty serious problem. And is there not some kind of is the necessity to provide proof? Does that not get into
For some, no.
fix that up?
But
Yeah.
even if you do have proof that disproves it, some will always find a way to influence it with their beliefs and what they want it to be. Like, will say, oh, like someone they believe is good, who's actually, like a serial killer, just like, oh, he was a family man. He had like other things like that. They'll make excuses or find a way to kind of tip the scales back in their ideological favor.
Okay. Shannon?
They also tip the scales based on ratings too. What's gonna work? What's gonna either work best to excite or scare or rile up their target audience to get them to keep watching. So I think that's a large factor in deciding what details are highlighted and what ways stories are kind of spun.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll talk more about that, the way that the editorial function of the news, the way that what they call stacking the show, which is choosing which topics actually get reported on. And was it Jenny, did you say if it bleeds, it leads? Yeah, there's the cliche about the more ratings-driven motivations behind picking some stories over others. Yeah, Kyle?
Yeah, two things. I'm kind of on board with what she was just saying, because some of my personal issue with just who to believe and who not to believe with news is the fact that at the end of the day, something you said during a conversation the other day is do the corporations really have our best interests at heart? Because at the end of the day, to keep that corporation afloat, it's about making dollar bills. And at what point does what I get from them out-tip them getting from me that dollar bill? And
Gotcha. Okay.
are you really giving me what I need that I might not pay you as much for? Or are you giving me what you know will get me to pay you for that information, for that story?
Right.
Keep me hooked, will keep me coming back to keep giving you dollars.
Okay, so we're getting the same, as you said, yeah, it's there's a connection there with the corporate interests of the news media overriding the public information needs of the audience. Basically, that's what you guys are responding to.
Yeah.
Does that mean, I want to get to Carmen, but question, should we all be listening to NPR there? Carmen?
I think that's why citizen journalism got so popular the past few years, because we started realizing we can't trust the corporate media, and we could rely more on the people that were actually there, like when the Arab Spring happened and everything. Obviously, we couldn't trust any media that was coming out. But I also think it's gotten to such a point that now we're trusting citizen journalism the way we're trusting corporate media, and so there's fake citizen journalists saying, oh, I was attacked, but no, really, I attacked myself just so I could say I was attacked.
Oh, God, yeah.
So unfortunately now we don't have the guidelines, because we had guidelines technically for a long time with broadcast media and what was to be reported, and now we don't, because you're a citizen, so.
Gotcha. So maybe there was a naive belief in citizen journalism at a certain point, and although primary sources that have actually experienced events are important, that's obviously not the only thing that goes into reporting. You need context. You need reliable information to give individuals who've experienced something, to give it a framework that makes it understandable for everybody. So I think you're right that there was a period where citizen journalism was maybe oversold. Personally, I don't know how all you guys feel, and maybe we don't have time to get into all of it, but I don't distrust the corporate media just because they're a profit-driven corporate entity. I mean, I think that there are a lot of individuals within corporate media who are trying their best to get the reporting, accurate reporting out. What's called gatekeeping, we talked about it in the other class, is definitely an issue. Like, the editorial agenda in different media organizations will determine what they report on. People often remark that, watch Fox News, it's completely different than what, CBS News is reporting on that night. Not just their take on the same stories, but they're reporting completely different stories. They're avoiding reporting some stories and highlighting others, So I think we all have to be smart enough to see that, and we are smart enough to recognize that every source could have a motivation, and we've got to try to think it out, and we're always trying to deal with, the best facts that we can get right now, and that should be really our dedication, and to fix it. So I don't have time to keep on with all of this, but maybe we will in a second or afterwards, so let's come back to it, okay? So from that, I understand that we have a big interest or a big concern about this sort of conflict between profit motives and public information motives in some media altogether. So that, I think, is the answer to the question that I asked is, what do you think is the most important shortcoming in news media today, I guess. So that's what you guys have picked up. Yeah, so interesting. So now I want to get into just what the chapter has to say about basic fact-checking of anything that you write for any medium, whether it would be for print or for radio or television or the web. So the first thing is this takes time, which I guess explains why it may not always be done that well or that completely. Another issue you folks may have come up with would have been, the pressure to post immediately. The acceleration of the news cycle due to technology and the internet always having to have the most up-to-date information leads to, not much time to fact check, which is a problem. So it takes time. Appropriately for our class, the textbook emphasizes the details to start out with. Sweat the details. Check your spelling. The reason being is you just won't appear credible if you misspelled stuff. That's basically it. And that takes time just in itself to run a spell check and then read it over, because you know how it goes if you've written, there are words that sound phonetically the same but mean different things depending on how they're written. And even if your spell check goes through and finds all those little spelling errors, you may still have stuck the wrong word in for something that you meant otherwise. Or you can, just go slightly off. So you need to go line by line and really read through it. And that is boring. That is like, it's the last thing you want to do after you've sweated, actually writing something. But it's really important, really worthwhile. This website has this journalist, Robert Rector, although he hasn't done it this year, for a while, every year he was trying to get together the funniest or the craziest corrections that he could find from newspapers and such all over the web that he could find. Some of them are not so, let's just see if we can find a couple that are fun here. The link is here.
What a brave black man.
What?
Oh my God.
Where did you see this?
The bottom. Wow.
Reporter Amanda Hess, in a story published Monday, acknowledges she wrongly wrote that 1 in 3 black men who have sex with me is HIV positive. fact, the statistic applies to black men who have sex with men. So all she did was she left out the N. She left out the N. So instead of N or E.
Wow.
Would have been bad one way or the other. So there's one letter that a spell checker. Which others have we got?
The one at the top from the Daily Mail.
In articles published on 23rd and 26th of May, twice we gave the impression that Mr. David Guest had contracted a sexually transmitted infection and alleged that he had Liza Minnelli's dog killed without her knowledge. This was wrong. David Guest has never had a sexually transmitted infection.
Oh my God.
So there's just a factual.
Daily Mail, so.
So yeah.
Okay.
Not the most reputable.
Killed it with the STD.
Oh boy.
I thought he got an STD from the dog.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the September profile of Chelsea Clinton, Waiting in the Wings by Jonathan Van Meter, Dan Baer was mistakenly identified as an interior designer. He is Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the U.S. Department of State. Vogue magazine.
Jello wrestling.
Okay.
Jello wrestling in the South
It
Pole.
did not involve taxpayer funds.
Okay, well, so these are funny, but these are actually real. I mean, they weren't made up. So these are professional journalists making
Bloody Mary one's good.
mistakes.
Probably better the other way.
Which one is this? A Bloody Mary recipe called for 12 ounces of vodka and 36 ounces of tomato juice. The recipe is printed incorrectly. Reverse the amount. Okay. Now that's a very harmful mistake to drink it that way. So
Wall Street Journal. Today.
you don't want people laughing at you like this, right? You don't want people, or even worse, offending entire groups of people and so on and so forth with a little mistake. So this is why you really want to reread your work and just make sure you said what it is you wanted to say, right?
Too low.
Sorry?
Be too low.
Exactly. That would have, with better fact checking there, you would have found that up by reviewing proper nouns. Letter by letter examination of every proper noun in anything you write. So basically names of organizations or people and such, because those obviously a spell check is not going to get those because they have their own original spelling. So you want to go through those. You may pick up some really weird stuff, but in general, you're probably just going to pick up misspellings and stuff. So when we did interviews for the shows that I worked on, we'd always ask for a business card, and if for somebody didn't have a business card, we would actually ask, we'd write down their name, and we'd ask them to speak it into the camera as well. What's your full name and position, your official position, and spell your name for us before we began an interview or anything like that. So it was, the editor, because sometimes, you may not be there when you're actually finishing up a story that you worked on, and who knows, you're supposed to send a script in with things written properly, but we also always had it at the start of a tape, so if anybody, needed it quickly and badly, they could go right to the start of a tape and find out, okay, what's this person's actual position? So spelling names and getting a position right is also something important. Another thing is make sure that if you refer to someone like as Robert Smith early on, don't call them Bob later on. Stay consistent. No, I mean it's just you could, even if someone was telling it to you. So remain consistent throughout the work. If you're using a name one way, use it the same way all the way through. So checking for consistency. Let's say you didn't get that or you've lost it or something, where to check? Check official sites, official company directories and things like that. Watch out, maybe LinkedIn or some other social media will not have the name written right. That could be an issue. It was surprising to me in the summer. I was visiting my mom in Canada, and she can't take care of much of her stuff anymore. And I was dealing with somebody at the bank, and their name was completely misspelled in all of their, completely different, and and I mentioned it, and they said, oh yeah, the website's been wrong since I started, and it's like, well, why don't we fix that? You know what I mean? A bank, can't you get people's names consistently right? So there's an expectation of getting names right.
Yeah, I want you messing with my money.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get your employees' names right, or you can't be bothered to fix that. Kind of weird. Looking into the numbers, okay, so this is something that intimidates me, and I'm sure it intimidates others, is when there's math, you tend to think, okay, you're going to defer to a source maybe because you feel that their math is better than yours, but the story is check it out. Try to check out those numbers as best you can. Yeah, this is interesting. I had never thought of this. In obituaries, do the math from the person's birth date to his or her death date and make sure the age is right. So if you're saying that they died and they're 89 years old, just make sure that they were born in 1928, or if you can get their birth date, just to make sure, because that sometimes goes wrong. So try to walk through it. Is anybody reminded of the $2 trillion accounting error in the federal budget that the president's office put out?
Which one?
Yes. Oh, yeah. It wasn't a real budget. It was later on they said this is just sort of.
Matt, was this Trump or Obama?
This is Trump. 2 trillion counted twice. There we go. This is from Vanity Fair. Salon. Which source do we believe? New York Mag, Time.com. Should we believe?
Believe the Onion.
Oh, you believe the Onion. Now that's a subversive comment, Nick. I don't know. Oh my God, it's a video? Why not?
This is the digital version of Time magazine.
I guess so, yeah. Kind of nice music, I guess. I like that one. That's it. They didn't even tell us what they said they'd tell us. I've been hooked. Oh, scroll down.
Big
Thanks.
budget math mistake.
There we go. Strange though. Where is it? Budget includes what critics charge as a simple accounting error that adds up to $2 trillion. Okay, we don't need you again, thanks. All right, so it appears that this is still controversial, so I'm sorry, I don't want to hoax you, but critics charge that they counted the $2 trillion twice. But of course, I didn't follow that through. So there I go, I'm potentially giving you false news. But anyhow, so point is, try to do the math, try to follow through the math. See if it all adds up. All righty. Yeah, here's another one that I've screwed up on in the past. When giving directions, when talking about places, double check the address, and also if you're giving directions, the best thing to do is to actually try to get to the place where you're giving directions, if that's the case. When I worked at the Consulate of Canada, there was actually like one of my jobs at the time was actually to walk through the directions to the new location and stuff and make sure that they were as clearly understandable as possible. So that was that was interesting to actually have to go through and do your own directions. So check places, directions, and stuff like that. Got you. Well, broader issues I don't want to get onto until next class necessarily, but this would be a good sort of basic set of practices to do for, fact checking anything that you're writing. Check the spelling of stuff, review the proper nouns, and if you can, get through the math, do that as best you can. Check places and stuff. So those are important ideas before we get into the bigger picture, which I'd sort of like to leave for next class. I have a couple of videos supplied by the textbook that we could take a look. But Kyle, did you have something to say?
Yeah, if we have time, there was something I wanted to say earlier when we just.
Oh yeah, right. Do it.
And it's more a question really than confusion. But is I'm just wondering what your opinion on the idea that, as we've talked about, kind of traditional television and cable, and a lot of these sources that we've come to use for getting news are starting to become things of the past. And you can already look at, there are people that just have the platforms like YouTube or have used their name and the internet to influence 10 times the amount of followers that Fox News has at this point. And it's just like, in the next 10 years or so, when it grows even more in that direction and even less in this direction, where do you think we're going to get? Is like the traditional news source even still going to be a thing? Like, how, like, what does that look like? It just like seems really confusing, because it's already really confusing with like just the amount of information out there. Who do you believe? And single person versus corporation versus people that are starting solo and then becoming a brand, and then it's just really crazy. And
Yeah,
I feel like
celebrity journalists who are leaving news organizations and setting themselves up with a brand. That's another trend of people leaving, like the New York Times or like really top level people, and starting a website. And yeah, it's
lines are just getting really blurry.
I agree. I can't see the future. One of the things that I think is encouraging is that the social media platforms like Facebook are starting to look into what they can do to flag content, or to try to replace what old media used to do in terms of giving you a brand that you could trust. Because what you're saying is it's diversifying so much that one no longer knows who to trust, right? And I think you're right in the sense that it's going to continue to fragment and diversify. But maybe we'll be looking. I don't know what the future holds, but I could see Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media sites that continue to supply news or become the conduit for news. I could see them stepping up and trying to, vet news in a way that wasn't. I mean, a lot of people never used to trust old media anyway. New York Times was a capitalist conspiracy, CBS. I mean, so people will continue to mistrust. And I think mistrust is probably a healthy attitude, evaluate stuff.
Yeah, I think that's.
What do you guys think? I mean, does anyone else have a crystal ball that could see the future?
All news coming from Snapchat.
Okay, so if it comes from Snapchat, but do you guys see the possibility for some kind of, I'm not talking about content regulation, but maybe, commercial, a business that is supplying information might also try to rate it or establish that? I don't know, Micah?
I think the kind of the normal, conceptually normal way of delivering news has evolved over time. We no longer rely on town criers.
True.
Or things like nailed up onto the church doors anymore.
Right. Electronic media changed things. Yeah.
Eventually, newspapers will disappear. They'll be replaced. But we shouldn't view that as a bad thing, because there always will be people with standards and ideals of good journalism, and they'll just move on to the next big thing that they can convey to the largest audience.
Okay.
Move on to websites and onto VR-based brain chips, and then some sort of liquid injected into us.
Okay. But before it became funny, it was also serious, and I think your comment is encouraging, because what it means is that there's still a set of values and practices. Call yourself a professional journalist or a citizen journalist, but there are still things you can do to try to maximize, the reliability, the accuracy of what you're doing. And whether you work for a newspaper or a TV show or a blog, you can do those. I guess the issue then still remains, how can an audience understand that you're in that business and not in the fake news business, if you want, and that's an additional issue. That's good. Jenny, did you want to say something? Then we'll get to Kyle.
I more so have a question, and I mean, this may be odd for some of you guys, but I don't know what Breitbart is. Although I am fairly young, nevertheless I do have a preference for the more traditional mediums like newspapers, like regular broadcast TV, and so forth. So
Have you gone to Breitbart.com?
Not really.
Well, you should.
I know
Check
it's
it out.
been-
Get your firsthand information from there.
Is this for racists and right-wingers?
I know that.
Yeah, guys, okay, could I interrupt and say I don't want to discuss this emphatically? I think you should go look at Breitbart. That's all. And then we can see. Because I know, Nick, and you're not wrong, Nick. It's just, I think I can spend my 10 minutes better than explaining what Breitbart is when you can go see it. Kyle?
Well, something he was talking about just a second ago. And,
Ika? Yeah?
and something that I experience just based on things I do in my own life is the idea that as it's gotten so big, you've also talked about how it's fragmented into smaller subgroups.
Yeah.
And I feel like the news needs to kind of try to go back to not always being about reaching the largest audience, but trying to reach the audience that needs that information. I've just read Walden, and a lot of his stuff he was talking about in like 1600s, 1700s America called for things that are happening now before it even started taking place. And it's this idea of like how much of what's going on way outside your scope of effective information that you can use to change things, how much of that is really relevant. Something going on all the way in China that you will never really be physically involved in changing. How much of that is relevant to the world right in front of you?
Yeah, well, this is an issue for the philosophy of media. I mean, since any media will take information from outside your immediate sphere and bring it into your everyday experience. So, but to speak to the earlier part of your comment, I think, the internet does allow a gigantic array of news channels, basically, for, just about any, I mean, we talked about it this summer, with the YouTube channel for, if you want to inform people about running shoes that they want to collect, you can do that. If you want to inform them about, Mike Daly, for instance, in our class, was heavily into informing people about civic issues here in San Francisco. It can be done. I mean, it's never been easier. So media can be as local and as specific as we need it to be. However, in the ecosphere, last class we had a video which just threw up on the screen dozens of different media organizations, large and small, and that's what we're existing in now. So I think they're all there. Some of them have a lot of problems with accuracy, but not all of them have to. Someone else wanted to say something. Shannon?
So it kind of goes along with what they were saying, because I personally think as like media fragments and kind of, I think the larger operations like the newspapers and the news outlets are kind of going to be shifted away from, and I think, yeah, the internet is going to really like fragment things and focus things into specific niches. And so I see the individual taking a lot more of responsibility for finding what works for them, but also regulation. You know, I think that it's going to be kind of on the individual to start looking into where they get their information
I agree.
from, as they have like so many options in front
I
of
agree. It's highly unlikely there'll be any, there will be no government regulation of content dedicated to making things accurate.
Yeah.
It's all on people to be more observant and more critical about what they listen to and watch, which is great. You may not all become writers for media, but just this discussion, I hope, is already, and next class, already going to start you thinking about, well, is the stuff that I'm reading, did anybody actually go through this? There's spelling mistakes in it. The names are wrong. The dates don't seem right. This is not very credible. So all of this is useful just as consumers as well as producers of information and writing and stuff. So this is great, and all our classes should have something like this in it, I think. And you're right, it is on the individual, I think. We can't count on other organizations. I'm just thinking in the last 5 minutes, because I don't mind if the conversation rides out over more philosophical issues, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get some of those techniques that we were talking about to write more accurately, more responsibly, regardless of what platform you guys are going to work on. So there's just a couple more videos here that I wouldn't mind. This one's 48 seconds long. PolitiFact is one of a number of websites that have come out that are dedicated to fact-checking, basically. In fact, so they've managed to find an audience interested enough in the truth to make it their business to check facts, which is an interesting sort of niche in the media business, isn't it? So anyhow, let's see how they do what they do. And I haven't watched this yet, I'm sorry to say, so I'm with you on this. But and then I think we'll be done and pick up these conversations next class. Fact-checking is always done to heavy metal music or rock.
I'm Bill Adair, the editor of PolitiFact.com. PolitiFact is a fact-checking website where we research claims by politicians and people in the media and then rate them on our truthometer as true, half-true, false, or our lowest rating, pants on fire. Our friends at YouTube asked us to share with you some tips about how we fact-check. Fact-checking is especially important these days because we get our news from so many different sources, from cable television, from news sites on the web, from blogs, and often, if you're like me, you find yourself wondering, is that true? And so that's really what fact-checking is all about. So let's start with the basics. The first thing is to go to the person who made the claim and ask them for their source. It's important first to give them an opportunity to explain their case, why they made the claim that they did, but also that can help you in fact-checking. By knowing what their source is, it can help you zero in on where you're going to begin your research. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that the claim is true, but it gives you a place to start. Then go to other sources to verify the claim. This is where it's important to pick the right sources. We try to go beyond just getting a news story about a government report or a government statistic and try to find the original report. We prefer independent sources like the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Budget Office, and the reports of the Congressional Research Service, because they're all independent, nonpartisan, and they provide good, objective, original research. And while we're talking about sources, here's an important principle to remember. Love and fear the internet. I'm reminded of a headline in The Onion, the satirical newspaper, that reported once, factual error found on internet. Shocking but true. That was 2002, and there have probably been a few errors found since then. Another source to be careful about is Wikipedia. We love Wikipedia and often go to it first when we're researching an issue, but we use it primarily to point us to other original sources. Because of its open nature, you can't be sure who has written the latest Wikipedia article, and you don't know if the person who wrote it has a particular agenda. So we use Wikipedia a lot, but we would never quote it in PolitiFact. We verify everything. We verify it by going to original sources and making sure that we understand where every number comes from and where every fact comes from. And it's important to work backwards and sort of find the roots of a fact. Finally, we always fact check our fact checking. Once I'm done writing a fact checking article, I print it out and I go through and I look at every sentence, and only when I'm certain that sentence is true do I put a red check mark after it. So that's our guide to fact checking. I'll leave you with one final piece of advice. Be skeptical and verify everything.
Cool. Okay. That's 2:45. We're done for today. So Thursday we can take this back up, and we're supposed to be looking at the big picture issues, so I'm sure you'll enjoy that.